I remember hours and hours of what they call grunts, which is just random sounds. What's key is at this moment that we're seeing right now where his parents are killed is what drives him right the way through both games, and the sort of the awful graphic nature of what happens to his parents. So anything that you see that is gameplay is not us physically, it's us vocally for sure. Hello there, my name's Tom McKay. I play Henry of Skalitz in Kingdom Come Deliverance, and I'm here with Gamology today to do some reaction videos to some KCD playthrough. This is a really unique experience for me because it's such a long time since we made KCD, and I've spent a lot of time in the last few months talking about and even playing through KCD 2, watching footage, giving interviews. This is a really quite a special sort of magical thing because I haven't watched any of this for literally years. What sort of strikes me immediately going back to the original game is that even though the sort of execution is inevitably not as polished as KCD 2, the sort of core elements and the key elements, if you like, that make the game so beloved by so many people are all there. And even in this short opening sequence so far, Jan Valter and Adam Sporker's incredible music, the amazing cinematic nature of the game, which, yes, all right, it doesn't visually look quite as polished, but those incredible shots, those sort of sweeping aerial shots, and the kind of majestic cinematic nature of it is absolutely in place. And I think that's what I mean about the key creative elements always having been there basically from the sort of beating hearts of the lead creatives. That hasn't changed between the two games, and it's really exciting and refreshing and heartwarming, I suppose, to go back and see the original game and realise that actually all of those pillars were very firmly in place. There he is, my dad. It's so interesting watching this because it's a bit like when you watch like classic films and everything you love about those classic films is there, and the sort of the technical execution is inevitably not the same as films that are made nowadays. But there's something because they're good quality and they were well made, none of that matters. You just watch it and it immediately feels familiar and challenging and brilliant and romantic and heartwarming and all these things. And I get that in spades off this game. It's so funny seeing this scene because inevitably there have been so many cutscenes that we've shot between shooting this one and today, working all the way through KCD 2. And there's loads of stuff that I don't necessarily remember because there's such a huge body of material. But I really do remember this, and sort of understanding that one of the brilliant things about Warhorse is that they always give you the information that you need. So understanding that this was very much the sort of first flag in the sand of Henry's story, and that it was just, you know, a very sort of domestic, simple, down-to-earth, rustic story that we were telling. And in spite of the kind of huge adventures that lie before him, he doesn't know any of that at this point. He just thinks he's a kind of village boy going through a normal day, having had a late night out with his friends. And it's really lovely to watch this and to remember this, and weirdly to sort of match that with all the adventures that we have been on since. Because we had no idea when we were shooting this scene that this game was going to become what it would become, and that there even would be a sequel. Never mind that the sequel would be a hit. You know, there's something quite magical about looking into Henry's eyes as Tom at this point of the process, knowing the adventures that both of us have been on separately but because of each other. I remember hours and hours of what they call grunts, which is just random sounds like we just heard in the fight. But it's so interesting hearing the old game because the sound is so brilliant, particularly for the resources they had. But you suddenly realise what a step up all the technical elements are when you get to the second game. And actually the sound now sounds so much more basic because it was so much more basic than what we have in the second game. Still the same incredible team, you know, making absolutely the most of what they had. But it really is a step up. I will say as well, the kind of realism of that fight, notwithstanding the technological challenges that they had by not having the same resources, is still pretty incredible, I have to say, for a game that started out as a Kickstarter campaign. Suddenly remember just what a brilliant job they did with not very many means.
Look, I don't know if you're mixed up in this or if it's just those friends of yours. It's all the same to me. But I have a trade.
It's so refreshing to go back to sort of, you know, Henry Mark I, where nothing bad's happened to him. He's just a young lad finding his way in the world. There's no trauma. There's nothing especially complicated about him. He's just like a naughty boy getting told off by his dad. And I do remember doing these scenes vividly. Yeah, and it's really lovely. It's been a very, very long time since I've gone back to these scenes and heard this dialogue. You know, I think it's 9 or 10 years since we shot these scenes. So yeah, this is a very enjoyable experience for me, I have to say.
Do you remember Emperor Charles?
I do. Life was good under his reign.
The key difference between KCD and KCD 2 from a performance perspective was that we didn't have HMCs on KCD, which head-mounted cameras. So the big sort of structures that you see in most performance capture, where you basically have a kind of a structure on your head that has a camera looking back towards your face and a microphone that is recording in real time everything that your face is doing. So we didn't have those in KCD. So what that meant was we had the same bodysuits with the dots all over them that were capturing your physicality, but there were other regular cameras in the space that would capture what you were doing. And then after the event, the team would have to kind of realize what you had been doing facially afterwards. The benefit to the HMCs is that you can be much, much more precise. So in terms of the nuance of performance, it's like shooting everything in extreme close-up. So you can offer the directors all the time a sort of extreme close-up version of whatever's going on, and that makes the actor's job a lot easier because you can just provide a greater level of detail. With KCD, that wasn't possible. I mean, I still think what they were managed to achieve with their limited resources was absolutely beyond belief. The quality of this is actually much better than I remember, and so what they were able to execute was kind of off the charts. But inevitably, once they had those greater resources with KCD2, just the level of detail was dialed up massively. It's so lovely. I'd sort of forgotten how brilliantly and effectively they bring in all the key elements to Henry's story so early on and so together. So like any kind of great iconic film, the sort of key elements of the story, like his dad and his mum obviously being like key part of his life, the sword being a huge sort of symbol narratively, obviously for what, you know, it's going to drive Henry's story, and it becomes a symbol of like revenge for what happens to his parents. And then of course Teresa, who is like the love of his life, at least for KCD, arguably even beyond, depending on how you choose to play. First game, we used to do a thing in the morning where we would sit and rehearse the scene around a table with all the actors that were included in the scenes for that day, and we would talk about it, and it would generally take about an hour. But what would generally happen is that we would be given the sort of context that we needed for those scenes on that day, and they were shot out of sequence often, like very much like TV filming. We didn't have such a great handle on the overall story. I mean, we did to the extent that we needed to, but there was no kind of sit down and go through the whole story in one sitting. Very quickly, I particularly was able to piece together all the elements because they absolutely gave me what I needed at the beginning, but in terms of the wider story, that was pieced together a bit more slowly. For the second game, they sat me down for about a day and a half and took me through the whole body of the main story for KCD2. So and I've still got my notes in a notebook for this with like loads of misspelt name places and things like Sasau I've spelt completely wrong. all these name places that, you know, were familiar to Czech people and not to me. But in terms of the wider story, I probably didn't have such a detailed understanding when we did KCD. And also that was just born out of the fact that I knew the world and the story and the character much better anyway by the time we got to the second game, because we had already made one game.
Once it's ready, send your son up to me.
Obviously, the cast of characters has grown exponentially over the course of the two games, especially in the second game. But it's really amazing to see these sort of key iconic characters all in one scene, played by such amazing actors that, you know, I've spoken a lot about the amazing body of actors that live in Prague and work across a huge body of projects. Michael that plays Radzik, Logan that plays Istvan, Matt who actually plays my dad is LA based. There's this amazing body of really talented actors who play the majority of characters through both games. You even heard earlier a guy called Gabriel was one of the guards, and like most of the characters in the game are played by this relatively small pool of really talented actors. As the actor, because people ask me a lot about the historical accuracy and how the level of the attention to detail that Warhorse give the historical accuracy, and they're right to. The truth is, just the right amount in terms of understanding the world that we're living in and the way behaviours that might give birth to. From the acting perspective, what you really need to know is like who you are, where you are, and why you're doing the things that you're doing. So you, in many ways, certainly the wider political context, Henry wouldn't have known most of those things. What's key, and it's really key in the narrative of the two stories, is that this moment that we're seeing right now where his parents are killed is the absolute engine, the fire in the belly, if you'll excuse the slightly unfortunate, is what drives him right the way through both games. But it really is the kind of heart of the story. And in a way, Henry doesn't need to know who these people are, why they're doing what they're doing. All he needs to know is the sort of seeds of anger and revenge and pain and trauma that it sows in him.
Believe it or not, this tempest is a godsend for me and my men. As my old granddad used to...
KCD, I've only played a little bit of. KCD2, it was really funny because I took a long time to think about how I was going to play KCD2 and whether or not I would do it very privately, just for myself, because obviously, you know, there's a huge amount of time and love and energy that's gone into playing the character. And then eventually I thought, well, actually, given that we have the most incredible community, you know, really energetic and supportive community, and they are sort of the beating heart, if you like, of the whole game. Warhorse is the kind of machine, the amazing machine that makes it. But there is no game without people that play it and who, in our case, luckily have got behind it so passionately. So ultimately, I was like, do you know what? I'd really like to do it with the kind of support and engagement of the fans. And also because my technical knowledge is, games are not my natural habitat. So I was like, I'm going to need some help and support anyway. So what better way to do it than with, the fan base literally in the chat, like guiding me through it and sharing the experience. But from a technical perspective, I have their support. And, often people try and guide me in a particular direction that they enjoyed in the game. In other cases, I go down many roads that the players themselves have never seen because they've made different choices. But it's the most rewarding way of doing it, and I'm really taking my time. I'm just doing it once a week, and I'm finding the most joyous way to do that. So there may be a world in which I go back and do that with KCD after the event, but my intention, at least for now, is to just get through KCD 2, which honestly, as those of you who've played it know, that could take me the best part of the year. Who knows?
I am sorry about what happened. Would you care to join us?
There's quite a funny detail about performance capture, which is that pretty much everything has to happen on one level. They do sometimes have structures where you can stand on a slightly raised platform, but they're never as tall, or the angles aren't as acute as the one we're seeing here. So when you do this, and even in KCD2 it was the same, you basically just have to act to the ceiling, and then the person in front of you, in this case me, is acting to the floor. So even though you're two people kind of looking at each other like that, your eye line is like that while you're talking. So you're kind of playing the scene concurrently, but like you're not at all looking at each other. It's quite a weird thing to do. All the combat that you're seeing now that's not us doing performance capture, because it's obviously gameplay related. So anything that you see that is gameplay is not us physically, it's us vocally for sure. When you get into the cutscenes, there was a certain amount of combat that we had to do, and in sort of most drama school trainings in the UK, you do what's called stage combat, so you learn the sort of basics of fight, and even though it's called stage combat, it's kind of fight for TV and film, for whatever it might be. You get to a certain level of that, but at a certain point, it becomes stunt work, and it becomes kind of unsafe and technically impossible for most actors to do that.
If you were about to draw it back more.
I have to say, when it comes to combat and weaponry, I, like many people, found the combat incredibly difficult in the game. But I will say, it is incredibly difficult, but it is also amazing the speed at which you get used to it. But I think patience definitely serves you well in this game and in life. In my KCD2 playthrough, I've started to have some wins, and my combat started to improve, and it feels incredibly good when that happens. Such a great example of like how they've carried through all the successful elements of the first game, all the brilliant things that they've held on to and improved inevitably, and then anything that wasn't working so well that they fixed. But things like the sort of visual of the blood clouding the screen is a great idea that is like pretty well done in the first game, but it's supremely well done in the second. The main takeaway and the sort of joy of watching that is just what level of talent was there right from the beginning. I vividly remember how limited the resources were, how small the team was. And when you watch it, that is not what you get. It doesn't look like a game made by a small body of people with limited resources. It looks incredible. And so it just makes me incredibly proud going back to watch that. The talent was always there, as is absolutely clear from watching that video, and it kind of makes me incredibly proud to watch it. Well, thank you all so much for watching that. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. It's for those of you that have played KCD, it's an amazing reminder of just what an incredible journey that was and how brilliantly put together it was by the team at Warhorse. And for those of you that haven't played it, hopefully it's a little appetizer for you to get back there and go back to the old school original version and get stuck in.